Marie Wood. I'm at the University of Vermont. I'm a professor of medicine, and I represent the clinical part of this program. We created back in 2003 a database prospectively gathered of women at increased risk for breast cancer. And it's from that database that we took cases and controls and samples from women far prior to developing cancer. Our goal was to see if we could really investigate these serum samples and their microRNA profile to see if we could come up with a profile of risk so that women might benefit in the long run by having a signal in their serum, a liquid biopsy, if you will, to determine what is their risk of developing breast cancer years prior to developing it. I'd like to introduce my colleague, Jane Liang.
Hi, I'm the basic science part of this program. I'm a professor of biochemistry, and we moved our whole lab to the University of Vermont in 2012 when I first met Dr. Wood. And the research background was our interest in identifying numerous microRNAs that we had characterized as being drivers of tumor progression and metastatic bone disease in both breast and prostate cancer. But with Marie's database offered just a wonderful opportunity to do longitudinal studies characterizing microRNAs that the literature and our laboratory had identified as being directly related to very specific cancer-related events. So microRNAs that mark the early, mid-stage, and actual cancer aggressiveness. For the first time, we could now look at women that were at risk, and we had just a very small percentage of Marie's large database actually developed cancer. And so we could actually go back and compare those who got cancer to those who were still cancer-free and at risk. And by doing that, we came up with a signature of microRNAs that could actually stratify these women into a risk category. And at this point, I would like to introduce Nick Farina, who joined our lab as a postdoctoral fellow. And he was actually the driver at the bench who developed all of the important protocols for all the data acquisition, including a very rigorous protocol for actually collecting the serum samples and analyzing them so that we would get very strong reproducibility and accuracy. And I'm going to let Nick explain.
Hi. So, as Jane said, when I joined the lab, it was right shortly after they moved up from UMass and met Dr. Wood with her pretty cool sample database that allowed us to actually ask if we identify risk markers, patients well before they actually develop breast cancer. And so the first thing was to actually standardize both the isolation of RNA from serum. I know that there's been a fair amount of work over the past many years, but this was 4 years ago, I believe, when we first started. To standardize the isolation protocol so we could reproducibly, consistently get good quality RNA. Then it was right around the time when Affymetrix updated the microRNA array to the mirror-based version 20 that included an extra at least 300 to 400 microRNAs that were not available on the prior chips. There's also a slight difference in their chemistry, so the chips are more robust now. The screen was then to do the microRNA profile on these women who were at risk that then went on to develop breast cancer or that today remain cancer-free. And got all these profiles and didn't really know what to do. And we worked with the bioinformatics core here to develop an iterative stepwise model to identify those microRNAs that best distinguish those women eventually being diagnosed with breast cancer versus those who remain cancer-free. This was been a very joint and collaborative project between the hospital, the cancer center, and the various cores, both the microRNA genomics core and the computational bioinformatics core. And then with that, I would like to introduce Dr. Gary Stein, the director of the Cancer Center.
And a longtime friend and collaborator of these folks. So to me, what is really important is twofold. One, at the very general level of how we address the cancer problem, prevention becomes more important than ever before, unquestionably. And prevention, early detection, if you have detectable disease, the earlier you detect it, the treatment is going to be far less detrimental to the patient and far more supportive, because quality of life becomes very key. And cancer is becoming a preventable and a treatable disease, but you need information. And if you can secure information through a liquid biopsy, through a very, very small blood sample, then you have options that we can act on immediately, and that's going to expand as a function of time. This group has been focusing on non-coding RNAs. MicroRNAs are one dimension to the problem. Fragments of transfer RNAs are a second dimension to the problem. Long non-coding RNAs are a dimension to the problem. And those dimensions are increasing very, very rapidly. So to us, this is a very informative platform for decision-making, and it is going to go ahead and be interfaced with a lot of additional information that can be secured from the very, very same samples. And that is going to facilitate this objective of making cancerable, preventable, and treatable disease. And the last point I was going to make is we want to be able to understand the earliest warning sign, but we also want to be able to make the decision whether to treat or to continue to observe. And this information is going to contribute towards that type of decision making as well.
I was going to say we were very pleased with the response of the reviewers to when we submitted our manuscript to Oncotarget, and they really did appreciate the fact that even though we had a small number of patients that would derive this information, it was something that was so useful for physicians and others who had similar types of databases to use these markers and validate what we had. And that's really the long-range goal, is to make this an easily diagnostic set of parameters for evaluating risk.
And that brings up the importance, I wanted to make 2 points. One, the importance of a collaborative group of individuals who really listen to each other, but coming from very different backgrounds. It's often very difficult for the basic science to listen to the clinical language, and we've had some trials getting people to understand risk for cancer versus early detection, which this is not. This is risk for cancer years prior, which makes it very different. It doesn't necessarily have implications on treatment, because these biomarkers that we've identified and this profile is mirrors that haven't really been described. So it could be some environmental or epigenetic phenomena that's driving this risk, but that's very different than prognostic markers. So that really sets this apart. Current models that we have to assess women's risk for cancer really fail us, because they are good on the population level, but they're not good on the personal level. So this, we hope, represents a jump forward for precision medicine in the prevention realm.
That brings up something that was very rewarding for us when we moved the lab here, and that was the culture here at the University of Vermont. I guess Vermont in general, everyone is so supportive of each other, very collaborative. I mean, the clinicians, have a lot of patience with the basic scientists, and we've learned a lot from each other. So this project has really culminated into a wonderful example of what could be done, with similar types of
And
studies.
also highlights the training that we do here at the University of Vermont. So to be able to be a postdoc and contribute this significantly to a project, I think represents the commitment that people have to the teaching role that we do and the mentoring roles.
Yeah, it was very nice to come home. I grew up in Vermont. To come home to find not only an awesome environment to work in, but the exact kind of projects that I was very interested in doing.